The police cruiser screeched to a stop in front of my house so fast it kicked mulch off my flower bed. Neighbors froze mid-stride. Even the kids on bikes went silent. Officer Ramirez stepped out, scanning the street like he was hunting someone dangerous. "Is there a Karen Wilkins here?" he called. Karen, our iron-fisted HOA president, stumbled forward, trying to rearrange her face into confidence. It didn't work. Not with the crowd watching. Not with the officer looking directly at me next. "Sir," he said, "I need to confirm something. The footage you have, it shows her doing what you reported, right?" Every eye turned to me. And that's when Karen whispered, "Daniel, you didn't tell them everything, did you?" Karen Wilkins had been a problem long before the police showed up, long before the house numbers, the fake documents, or the screaming match in my driveway. From the moment I moved into Oakwood Estates, she made it clear she ran this neighborhood like a personal kingdom. Her power wasn't in the bylaws. It was in the way she interpreted them. I still remembered my first week there. I was unloading a bookshelf from my truck when she marched over, clipboard in hand, hair sprayed into the shape of absolute authority. "You can't leave moving boxes visible in the driveway for more than 15 minutes, she warned. "Optics matter in a community like ours." That was the moment I understood her. Karen didn't enforce rules. She invented them. She had a pattern, too. She targeted residents who didn't worship her HOA gospel. People who worked long hours, single parents, military families, anyone she assumed wouldn't fight back. But me? She zeroed in on me the second she realized I didn't flinch when she spoke. Every week, a new violation landed in my mailbox. Grass a quarter-inch too high. Garden hose not coiled to her standards. Mailbox too modern, even though it matched the community catalog exactly. Karen wasn't after compliance. She was after control. And the day she manufactured a rule that didn't exist, that's when I knew I'd stepped into something bigger than petty HOA drama. I moved to Oakwood Estates 3 years before everything exploded. Back then, the place felt like the kind of quiet suburb people bragged about online. Clean streets, trimmed lawns, neighbors who waved without expecting a conversation. After years working chaotic municipal code cases in the city, I wanted something simple, predictable, peaceful, and for a while it was. My routine was boring in the best way. I'd grab a Starbucks on the way to work, spend the day dealing with property inspections and city permits, then come home, grill dinner, and unwind on the porch. Nothing about my life should have painted a target on my back. But Karen watched me differently. Most neighbors waved. She evaluated, measured, judged. At first I assumed she was just another overzealous HOA president, the kind who wanted the neighborhood to look like a magazine spread. So I followed the rules to the letter. I read the entire HOA handbook, repainted my mailbox the approved shade of Oakwood beige, even planted the exact flowers listed on the preferred vegetation page. I wasn't trying to impress her. I just didn't want trouble. And for a while the peace held. A few nitpicky warnings here and there, but nothing worth a fight. Then one afternoon everything shifted. I came home and something felt wrong. Not broken, not vandalized, just off. It took me a minute before I noticed. My sleek black house numbers were gone. In their place were those gaudy brass digits crookedly screwed into the siding, not just changed, replaced. I stared at them like some stranger's address had been welded onto my home. I hadn't requested it. I hadn't approved it. And no legitimate HOA authority allowed anyone to step onto private property and alter a house. But before the confusion could fully settle in, I heard that sharp, self-satisfied throat clearing behind me. Karen stood on my lawn like she'd been waiting for her cue. "Your numbers weren't compliant," she said, as if that explained everything. That moment, the trespass, the lie, the smugness, was when the cracks in my peaceful little suburb finally split open. Because house numbers weren't just decor. They were safety. And Karen had no idea I dealt with address regulations every single day. The house number stunt wasn't the beginning, just the first time Karen stopped pretending. The weeks leading up to it were filled with small, irritating jolts of harassment that didn't look like much on their own, but formed a pattern only someone in my line of work would recognize. It started with a yellow HOA courtesy notice taped to my door. Garbage can visible from street for 22 minutes after pickup. We didn't even have a rule that specific. Then came another. Grass, 1/4 inch above limit. I measured it myself. It wasn't. Soon I caught her staring through her blinds whenever I pulled into the driveway. Not watching, monitoring, like she was waiting for the slightest slip-up. One afternoon I found a folded note wedged under my doormat. No signature. "Your porch light seems unusually bright. Please adjust." It wasn't just petty, it was personal. But the real twist came the day I discovered the swapped house numbers. Because as I stood there trying to make sense of it, I realized something chilling. Karen hadn't walked up my driveway from the street. Her footprints came from the side of my house. She'd been behind my fence. The morning after I discovered the swapped house numbers, Karen stopped pretending she operated from the sidewalk. I caught her inside my side yard, phone out, snapping photos of my air conditioning unit like it was contraband. When she noticed me, she didn't apologize. She doubled down. "Your unit is sitting 1/2 inch over the utility clearance line," she announced, waving her phone like a warrant. "I can issue a corrective order." "It was installed by a licensed contractor," I reminded her. "You know, people with actual authority." That must have irritated her, because that evening I received an email titled, "Non-compliance, final warning." According to her, my porch mat was too large, my hose reel was visually disruptive, and my work truck, parked in my own driveway, was commercial equipment. None of it was true. The creepier part? All the photos attached were taken up close, from angles only possible if she'd stepped onto my porch. Then, just when I thought I'd seen the extent of her overreach, a handwritten note showed up in my mailbox. "If you continue ignoring regulations, the HOA will take corrective action. You won't like the alternatives." Threatening, unsigned, and slipped into federal mail. But the real twist? The handwriting matched Karen's meeting notes. 2 days after the threatening note, Karen stopped hiding behind warnings. She escalated into something tangible. Something that crossed from petty harassment into outright sabotage. I first noticed it when I went to leave for work. My truck's front tire was half deflated, a clean puncture dead center in the sidewall. Not a nail, not debris. Not a deliberate stab. Someone had knelt right beside my vehicle to do it. As I called the towing service, I checked my mailbox and froze. The mailbox door hung crooked, the screws loosened like someone had pried it open. Inside, half my mail was scattered and one envelope, the one containing my work ID renewal, was missing. That wasn't just vandalism. That was theft. I marched straight to my porch to review camera footage and found the camera was gone, completely ripped off the mount. The screws were still dangling. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Someone had been close enough to the camera to pull it off without triggering an alert. Either a very careful thief or someone who knew exactly where it was. When I checked the side of my house, I found the final confirmation. My original house numbers, my real ones, were lying in the mulch, bent like someone had tried to snap them in half. That was when I realized this wasn't random retaliation. Karen wasn't just enforcing fake rules anymore. She was trying to erase my identity from my own property. The morning after the mailbox incident, I got a knock on my door. Not from a neighbor, but from the county sheriff. The uniform alone made my stomach drop. "Morning," he said. "We received a complaint from your HOA about a potential code violation. Something about unpermitted construction on your property?" I almost laughed. My house hadn't had so much as a new screw added in months. He showed me the report. Photos of my backyard, my shed, my AC unit, all taken illegally, again, from inside my fence line. And every note on the form referenced, "Observations by HOA President Karen Wilkins." I explained the real situation as calmly as I could. Trespassing, vandalism, tampering, missing mail, stolen camera. The sheriff's professional expression tightened with every detail. "Well," he said, "if what you're describing is accurate, she's overstepping the authority of a homeowners association by a mile." But the twist wasn't his reaction. It was what he told me next. "You're not the only resident who's filed a complaint about her this month." Suddenly, this wasn't just my battle. The entire neighborhood had been quietly suffering, and Karen had no idea the walls were closing in. Karen snapped the moment she realized people were talking to the sheriff. The mask she wore, the composed, rule-obsessed president, crumbled overnight. And her next move was the kind that doesn't just break HOA rules. It shatters any illusion of sanity. It happened on a Saturday morning. I stepped outside to trim my hedges and immediately noticed something wrong. My house numbers were missing again. Not swapped, gone. Ripped clean off, screw holes exposed like open wounds. Before I could react, Karen came storming down the sidewalk, phone in hand, wild-eyed. "You think you can embarrass me?" she shrieked. Neighbors stepped out of their garages. Sprinklers paused. Conversations died. I held up my hands. "Karen, you came onto my property again. That's trespassing." "I was correcting a violation," she screamed, loud enough to echo. "You're undermining community standards. You're trying to turn people against the HOA." Behind her, Mr. Jenkins and 3 other neighbors gathered, watching with crossed arms. For the first time, she realized the audience wasn't supportive. It was judging. Then the real breaking point. HOA Vice President Ted Mitchell pulled up in his sedan, stepped out, and said, "Karen, we need to talk. The board has called an emergency meeting regarding your conduct." She froze, then turned pale. And that's exactly when the police cruiser rolled onto our street. Lights off, moving slow, coming straight toward us. The police cruiser rolled to a stop so quietly it made the scene even more unsettling. Officer Ramirez stepped out, one hand resting near his duty belt as he scanned the cluster of neighbors gathered around my yard. Everyone parted instinctively, leaving Karen standing alone in the center like a spotlight had been turned on her. "Is there a Karen Wilkins present?" he asked. She lifted her chin, trying to glue her composure back together. "I'm the HOA president," she said with a brittle smile. "How can I help the department today?" The officer didn't return the smile. "Ma'am, we received a report regarding tampering with residential address identifiers." He paused, letting the words settle. "That's a regulated safety marker under municipal code." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen scoffed loudly. "This is ridiculous. I was enforcing HOA standards. That resident," she jabbed a finger toward me, "has been openly defiant." Officer Ramirez turned to me. "Sir, do you have the footage you mentioned?" You could feel the tension shift. Neighbors leaned forward. Karen's jaw clenched. I nodded. "Yes, officer, everything is on file." And suddenly Karen's confidence evaporated. I held up my phone, pulling up the security app. Even without sound, the footage was devastating. Karen creeping up my driveway at 10:42 p.m., screwdriver in hand, brass numbers dangling from her fingers, her stepping over my flower bed, tearing the originals off. Then returning a second time, carrying a different set like she was testing variations. Gasps echoed around us. Officer Ramirez leaned closer. "Ma'am, this clearly shows you entering private property without permission." Karen's eyes darted wildly. "Those videos are fake. He doctored them. He's trying to manipulate the HOA." But Ted Mitchell, the HOA vice president, stepped forward. "Karen, we've received other complaints. People said you were entering backyards, taking photos through windows, inventing violations." The color drained from her face. Then I brought up the email she sent, her final warning, with photos clearly taken from my porch. Officer Ramirez's voice went cool. "This is evidence of stalking behavior. And the report from the postmaster? They're confirming tampering with your mailbox." Neighbors gasped again. Even the kids on bikes stopped chewing their popsicles. Karen pressed her hands to her temples. "You don't understand," she said, voice cracking. "If people don't follow the rules, the whole neighborhood falls apart." It wasn't an explanation. It was a confession. Officer Ramirez straightened up, no longer patient. "Ma'am, you are being formally cited for trespassing, vandalism of private property, and interference with regulated address markers. You may also face federal consequences for mailbox tampering." Karen staggered back like she'd been physically hit. No, you can't. I am the HOA president. I make the rules." A neighbor muttered, "Not anymore, you don't." Ted cleared his throat. "Karen, the board already voted this morning. You're removed from your position effective immediately." Karen spun toward him, horror dawning. "Ted, you can't do this. I built this neighborhood. I kept it perfect." "You terrorized people," Mrs. Rodriguez snapped. Karen's breaths got shallow, panicked. "You're all turning against me. Because of him." She pointed a shaking finger at me like I was poison. Officer Ramirez gently but firmly took her arm. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us for processing." "No, please, I only wanted order," she whispered. Her voice wasn't angry anymore, just broken. The officer guided her toward the cruiser. Each step felt like the street exhaling years of tension. Neighbors watched in stunned silence as Karen, the woman who had ruled Oakwood Estates like a tyrant, was placed into the back seat of the patrol car. She looked at me through the glass, eyes wide, desperate. And right before the door shut, she mouthed something I couldn't quite hear. "Ikish." But I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. When the police cruiser finally turned the corner and disappeared, the entire street exhaled at once. It was like someone had loosened a knot tied around the whole neighborhood. People looked at each other, not in fear or suspicion anymore, but with the kind of shared recognition that comes after surviving a storm together. Mrs. Rodriguez approached me first. "Daniel, thank you," she said quietly. "We've all been scared to say something for years." Mr. Jenkins nodded. "She bullied half this street. You were just the first one who pushed back with proof." One by one, neighbors came over, some offering apologies for staying silent, others admitting Karen had targeted them too. A couple of residents even asked if I could help them review their own HOA violations, because now they weren't sure which ones were real and which ones Karen had fabricated. It felt strange. I wasn't used to being the center of attention. I certainly hadn't planned to become the neighborhood whistleblower, but as the conversations continued, I realized something important. Karen hadn't just manipulated rules, she'd manipulated people. She'd used fear to rule Oakwood Estates, convinced everyone that she alone kept chaos from creeping in. And now that she was gone, people were smiling, chatting. Kids were riding bikes without parents, anxiously checking the driveway angles. For the first time since moving in, the neighborhood actually felt like a community. That evening, I sat on my porch with a cold drink, letting the quiet settle in. No surveillance, no threats, no Karen lurking around the corner. Just a normal, peaceful suburban sunset, something I hadn't had in a long time. The following week was a whirlwind of updates. Officer Ramirez called to let me know Karen had been formally charged with trespassing, property vandalism, and interference with official address markers. The postal inspector added a separate violation for tampering with federally regulated mail, which came with its own hefty penalties. But the legal fallout didn't stop there. The HOA board, minus Karen, called a special meeting, not the aggressive, condescending kind Karen used to run. This one was open, calm, and shockingly democratic. The turnout was the largest the community had ever seen. Ted Mitchell, now acting president, addressed everyone with a mixture of embarrassment and resolve. "I want to apologize," he said, "for allowing Karen's behavior to go unchecked. We should have stepped in long before this." Residents voiced their stories. Times Karen had wandered into their backyards, taken unauthorized photos, filed invented violations, or used the HOA logo like a weapon. The board unanimously voted to remove Karen from all HOA authority permanently, audit all violation notices from the past 2 years, repeal several guidelines Karen had created without approval, restructure the complaint system with transparency and oversight, install checks so no single person could abuse power again. It was the kind of accountability Karen never imagined possible. Her attorney contacted me twice, attempting to arrange a settlement to avoid civil action. But the truth was, I didn't want her money. I just wanted my neighborhood back. And judging by the smiles I saw every evening, I wasn't the only one. A month later, summer officially hit Oakwood Estates. Kids played with sprinklers, families walked dogs at sunset. Neighbors who barely knew each other before were now organizing a 4th of July block party, something Karen had banned for noise uniformity. Life was normal, better even. But karma wasn't quite done with Karen. One morning, I received a letter from the county. Karen had applied to serve on the Community Beautification Advisory Panel and had been automatically rejected due to her trespassing conviction. She would never hold a position of neighborhood authority again, anywhere. A week later, a moving truck appeared in front of her house. Curtains drawn, no goodbye wave. She slipped away the same way she ruled, quietly, without explanation, hoping no one noticed the damage she left behind. But the neighborhood noticed something else instead. peace. On the night she moved out, neighbors gathered on my driveway with folding chairs, cold drinks, and a simple, unplanned celebration. Someone joked we should retire her brass numbers like a disgraced jersey. We laughed harder than we had in years. As the sun went down, Ted walked over to me. "You know," he said, "you might have saved this whole place." "I just wanted her off my porch," I laughed. But deep down, I felt something lighter, like I'd taken back more than my house. I'd taken back my life. Later, as I stepped inside, I paused to look at the restored black metal numbers on my house. Clean, sharp, exactly how they were supposed to be. And for the first time since moving in, I felt certain of one thing: no one would ever try to change my identity again. Not in this neighborhood, not in this home, and definitely not under my watch.